Well, hello and welcome to PM Express. And today we are looking at state of oil-funded projects. Today, PIAC came out with a statement saying that 50% of oil-funded projects in the 3 northern regions are non-existent. Very scary. Is it that they've been misplaced? Is it that somebody's done something funny with it? But either way, what it is the oil that we find in Ghana belongs to each and every one of us, those unborn and those born. And so a portion of the oil-funded money goes to developmental projects so that we all benefit from it. But every now and then, PIAC, who sort of supervises how we spend our oil money, goes around to see what's been done. And what they're saying is that the things on paper that are supposed to have been done are not done. And most of them are done very, very shoddy. How are we going to put a stop to this? Who is monitoring these projects? Who's giving out the funds and why? And that's the discussion on the table today. Something to bring to the fore so that we find a way of putting a cap to it so that oil-funded projects be exactly that, oil-funded projects which benefit you and I, because as it stands now, the narration does not look good. My name is Nana Nsako, the 4th Chief of Akwamodu Masa. When I come back, we are trying to find out where these projects are. Don't go.
The committee has observed that the ministers of finance over the years not complied with the provision of updates on the status of implementation of oil-funded projects. In 2016, following the initial inspection of projects in the 3 regions of the North, PIAC wrote to the Ministry of Finance for explanation on the non-existent projects. The letter was dated 4th August 2016. As we speak, the letter is yet to be acknowledged, let alone acted upon. We are therefore compelled to compile a list of these ghost projects and refer them to the Auditor General for further investigation. Should any wrongdoing be established, PIAC will ensure the trigger of the necessary prosecutorial processes to forestall their reoccurrence. PIAC acknowledges government's efforts through the Ministry of Planning to engage district planning officers in monitoring and evaluation of ABFA-funded projects and programs. It is the expectation of the committee that the exercise would help the Ministry of Finance to provide updates on oil-funded projects in keeping with Section 48(2)(b) of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act.
Well, thank you very much for staying, and with me in the studio for the first time, Dr. Thomas Kojo Stevens, who's Vice Chairman for PIAC. Doc, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, sir.
Great to have you on the show.
Great to be here.
Doc, I just want to, before we even come to this, we'll look at PIAC, what is it and why was it established?
Okay. So PIAC is a creature of statutes. It was created under Act 815, which is the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. So this act was enacted mainly to look at the collection and allocation of the petroleum revenue. Now, when this act was being drafted, the framers thought it wise to have some kind of watchdog, some kind of body that would monitor how the oil revenue was being used. So it was under those circumstances that PIAC was created, the Public Interest and Accountability Committee. So PIAC has been created under Section 51. So Section 51 of the PRME. The PRME is the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. The acronym for it, or the abbreviation, is PRME. So it was created under Section 51 of the PRMA with the objective of monitoring the use of the utilization of the oil resources, to provide space and platform to debate on how this oil revenue is being used, and also to provide independent assessments as to the utilization of the revenue of the oil resources. So PIAC comes out each year with a semi-annual report and an annual report on the utilization of the revenue and happenings in the industry, which has a direct impact on the oil revenue. So you have to pardon me, I have a bit of a cough. Yeah. So in line with this concept of PIAC being a watchdog, we really want to insulate PIAC from government interference. Mm-hmm. So when PIAC was created, right, the members of PIAC has 13 members. Now the members of PIAC are not government appointees. They're not appointed by the government. So the members of PIAC are nominated by the different institutions. So you have members from the Trade Union Congress, from the Institute of Chartered Accountants, from the Ghana Bar Association. I'm the representative for the Ghana Bar Association. From the Ghana Journalists Association, from Association of Queen Mothers, the Christian groups, the Muslim groups, etc. You know, so the 13 of us come together to form the committee. So we are nominated by different institutions, and then we are appointed to PIAC. Now we have security of tenure, meaning that if there's any change in government, etc., right, we are insulated from any form of interference. Now, unless due to ill health or some other reason, a member of PIAC cannot be removed under any circumstance, right? So we are insulated from any form of government interference, and the idea, the concept is for us to do our work without any fear, you know, or favor. And
is PIAC able to suggest or advise?
Advise who specifically?
Well, the finance minister spends the money, right?
Yes, we make recommendations. So if you look at a semi-annual report and if you look at an annual report, every year PIAC makes recommendations. A lot of recommendations that PIAC makes, you know, have been taken on, you know, and then implemented. So if you look at the semi-annual reports and the annual reports, PIAC makes all these recommendations, you know. So that's the concept of PIAC. You know,
we heard Doctor saying that, you know, as part of the responsibilities, the finance ministers are supposed to come to Parliament and give frequent updates on how, yes. And so far nobody's done that yet. I mean, how is PIAC taking that?
So PIAC has recommended that. So it's a statutory obligation on the minister under Section 48(2)(b) of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act that he must update. You know, he must update us on the on how the money has been allocated, and how. So if it's been allocated to projects, the minister must inform us on the status of each project. So assuming that we've allocated, let's say, 40,000 to the building of some building, it should tell us at what stage, you know, at what stage the project has reached, etc. Now that's an obligation that none of the finance ministers, you know, have done. But if this was being done, it would even make the work of PIAC easier, and it would inform the citizenry better, you know, as to how the oil revenue is being utilized. So going forward, so PIAC has been pushing, and it's going to keep pushing going forward, that the Minister for Finance must comply with the statutory obligation under Section 48(2)(b), and then comply with the said provision.
I hear, I mean, from the oil fraternity that with regards to laws governing oil and how it's managed and everything, we have a fairly solid, you know, we are ahead of many.
I would agree with that. You know, the law on the books, very good. You know, so we have the Petroleum Exploration and Production Act of 2016, Act 919. That repealed the Petroleum Exploration and Production Act of 1984, right? Now, if you look at the Petroleum Act, right, the extrapolations from the Norwegian Act, right, the extrapolations from it, but it took time for us to, you know, basically come out with this piece of legislation. We had the 2010 bill, we had a bill of 2010, 2013, 2014, before we had one 2016 bill, which was finally passed into law. The Petroleum Act is a good piece of legislation. Now, we also have the Petroleum Commission Act, which set up the Petroleum Commission. Now, there was this perception that GNPC was performing both a commercial and a regulatory role, in the sense that it was not the regulator of the industry, but prior to commercial discovery, it was performing a regulatory role which had been ascribed to the minister. So it was performing regulatory role on behalf of the minister, though it was not the mandated regulator of the industry. Now the IOCs come in, and a complaint that they have is that, okay, so GNPC is a party to every petroleum agreement. So GNPC sits at table with the rest of us. So when GNPC sits at table with the rest of us, it's like it's a player like any other. But when GNPC goes back and performs these regulatory rules, then it's as if the referee is also, the player is also a referee. So they were, so they agitated a bit, that, there should be, GNPC should perform strictly commercial roles, and then we had consultants, etc., pushing, for that. And of course, we had the Norwegians who are helping us with the industry, etc. Now, the Norwegians have some kind of separation of powers in the sense that they have the national oil company, they have the regulatory body, which is the MPD, and then they have the state oil company, Statoil. So they were pushing for this separation as well. So we had a situation where we created the Petroleum Commission so that GNPC could focus strictly on its commercial role, and then the Petroleum Commission could perform regulatory, technical, and advisory functions. So we have the Petroleum Commission Act, and then we enacted the Petroleum Revenue, the PRMA, Petroleum Revenue Management Act of 2011. So this act targeted towards the utilization of the oil revenue. On paper, people think it's a fabulous piece of legislation, and it is good. We extrapolated from countries like Timor-Leste, Trinidad and Tobago, and of course the Norwegians helped us in basically drafting this piece of legislation. So on paper, it looks good. It looks good, and then there are there are safeguards, etc. The problem has always been the implementation. The implementation has always been the problem with Ghana. We have very good laws. Those who draft the laws, they do a fantastic job, etc. So if you take Act 815, right, it's like a good piece of legislation, but the problem that we've had with Act 815 is the implementation. So Act 815 was, there were certain amendments made to it in 2015. So we have the Petroleum Revenue Management Amendment Act of 2015, Act 893, which made certain amendments to Act 815. I put together, taking as a whole collectively, it's a good piece of legislation. The problem that we've had is the implementation.
I thought, well, maybe I thought wrong, but I thought with the oil sector, the implementation was, fairly okay. Or okay, let me just drop the fairly and say I thought implementation was okay in the oil sector. I know generally implementation has been, something that we lack in all sectors, but I just thought, maybe you educate me that the oil sector was doing quite fine.
So implementation in respect of which aspects of the operations? Are you talking about the operations itself? Are you talking about the revenue management?
Well, revenue management.
Revenue management, if you look at the PIAC reports, there have been several infractions which PIAC has raised, and strongly advised that they be corrected. So there have been situations where there's not been exact compliance with Act 815. So we've done fairly well, but we can do better.
Let's come back to, now we have the basis of PIAC, but let's come back to what was in the news today with regards to certain projects that can be found even though they show on the books, yes, and others which can be found but are not in the right state.
Okay.
This is not the first time I've heard this. For quite some time, we've been hearing this alarming. How does it happen that oil funds are released for Block A, Block B, and you turn up and there's no Block A, there's no Block B, or Block B is 5 minutes old, but it's in a dilapidated state?
Okay. First and foremost, if I may correct an erroneous impression that may be being created out there, I just saw just before we started the show that they're seeing that 50% of oil-funded projects, PIAC is seeing that 50% of oil-funded projects are non-existent. That is not actually what PIAC said. Okay,
on my Joy Online, it says 50% of oil-funded projects in the three regions.
The three regions?
In three regions.
In three regions.
Non-existent.
Non-existent. Yeah. Okay, that would be a fairly accurate,
okay,
if that's put that way. Okay. So could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so I mean, how does it happen that
Yes.
funds are released for a project and the project is not there? I find it a bit wild.
Well, so that's the question that PIAC is also asking. You know, okay, so we get this information from the Ministry of Finance that these are the projects that funds have been disbursed to. So we go and then go and inspect the project. So he tells us that, okay, so let's say, for instance, you go to Adabraka. You are supposed to see a 3-story building there, right? That is supposed to be, let's say, for a school. So PIAC members, we show up there. They're going to do a physical inspection of the building. So we show up at Adabraka. We go to we show up at Adabraka, let's say Kwame Nkrumah Avenue. We go to the spot, we look there, and then there's no building there. Right? There's no building there, but per records, per the information that has been provided by the Ministry of Finance, let's say that we're informed that 50,000 Ghana cedis has been allocated to the building of a 3-story building at Kwame Nkrumah Avenue. We go there two years later, and then there's no building there. You know, so then we ask, so the money has been disbursed, but there's no building there. The building that is said to have been used, a building, the money which has been disbursed to be used to put up that building, there's no building there. So then we ask that question. So then, where's the money? Where's it going to? So it's the same question you're posing. That's the same question PIAC has been posing. You know, that the fiscal project is not there. So then where's the money?
Well, let's go back. I mean, obviously the oil money doesn't come directly to, it doesn't come to your bank account or PIAC. It will go to the Ministry of Finance.
We have what you call the Petroleum Holding Fund.
Okay.
So the money from the different sources, from royalties, from carried interest, additional interest, surface rentals, etc. You know, all that money comes in, it's pulled together, and it goes to the Petroleum Holding Fund. The Petroleum Holding Fund is a transitory account. So the money is kept there for just a period, after which it is disbursed to a number of areas, which is prescribed by Act 815. So GNPC must receive not more than 55% of the carried and the participating interest. So that will be disbursed to GNPC, and then the remainder, not more than 70% of the remainder, will be disbursed to the ABFE. The ABFE is the annual budget funding amount. So the budget will receive a portion, not more than 70%. Now the remainder goes to the Heritage Fund and the Stabilization Fund. So the Stabilization Fund is supposed to receive not less than 30%, and then the Heritage Fund is supposed to receive not less than 30%, and the Stabilization Fund not more than 70% of the remainder. So that's the disbursement as prescribed by Act 815. But when the funds come in, it goes to this fund, what you call the PHF, the Petroleum Holding Fund.
Okay. Now, see, what I was trying to lead to is, I mean, with these days of give makes and double check and triple check, how is it that if it goes into the Petroleum Fund and I appeal to you that, listen, my community desperately, we need a school, and the board probably sit down and say, yep, they need a school. The money is released and you come and there's no school. That's how I find bizarre. Is it there's nobody monitoring, or is it that the money went to pay for some other services other than the school? Because it's just...
Okay, so it's not for PIAC to conjecture or etc. We go and then inspect, and then whatever our findings are, then we put it out there. It's not for us to allude to anything. So we went and then we did this inspection, and those were our findings. So when we came back, what we did was that we wrote to the Ministry of Finance. I think it was on the letter is dated the 4th of August 2016. We wrote to the Ministry of Finance that we've been to the Upper West, Upper East, and the Northern regions. Right? These were our findings. 3 projects were non-existent, and the other 3 very shoddy. Could you please react to this? Let us know what the status is. So we did not hear from the Ministry of Finance, But subsequent to PIAC, that's what you call the district engagement. So we go to different districts, etc., to engage the citizenry, to get feedback from them as to how best they want the oil revenue to be used, and also to let them know how their money is being used. But a consistent feedback we kept getting, that they kept asking us was, have you been there? This project that you see have been done. Have you been there to physically see that it's there? And that some of the project that you are showing us has been done within our community. It is not there. At times they'll try and hold you fiscally that come and see. They're trying to take you there to go and look at it, that it is not there. You are seeing that it is there, but it is not. So based upon this feedback and based upon our experience in Upper East, Upper West, and the Northern region, then we got alarmed that there's a need to expand the scope, because what we did in Upper East, Upper West, and Northern region was more like a sampling. So for 2017, we conducted 40 projects, to be 40 fiscal inspections, and there was a recurring theme that a lot of the work had been shortly done, and we had a situation where it appeared that we're trying to tackle too many projects at the same time. So you have a situation where it seems as if, in local parlance, what you might call sope-sope. So everybody is getting a little. So at the end of the day, the projects are not being done well, and it's shoddy work. Now, you can go to a building, you'll be told that the building was constructed, let's say, just 2 years ago. But if you look at the state of the building, there's no way you believe that this was a building constructed 2 years ago. In a lot of situations, even the fixtures and fittings were just not there. So we are looking at how this money is being utilized, and then we have a problem with this, that, shoddy work, right? In respect of the roads,
because with oil-funded projects, there are no the designated supervisors or monitors.
Okay, so when the money, so when the money is, that's a big problem that we PIAC raised, because when we went to the communities, those within the communities, they did not know. First, they didn't even know that it was oil revenue that was being used to fund the project, or even a part of oil revenue that was being used to fund the project. But even more importantly, they were not consulted whatsoever in respect of the project. So they will be there, and then some contractor will come and then start the work. But in a lot of places, especially the schools, etc., they inform PIAC members that that other pressing needs, that if they had been consulted, they would have opted for some other projects being done, and that the project being done, they were not consulted. So we went to, let's say, Odogono Senior High, right here in Accra, So the headmistress informed us that, they were not consulted in respect of the project, and then there were a lot of things that they would have preferred was done differently, but this was a situation where they had no say, So even then, there were problems with the sewage and what's not there, and that, so there were complaints, etc. So PIAC has been hammering on this, that if you're going to do any projects in the community, first and foremost, you need to engage the citizenry in that community. Find out what their needs are, find out if the project that you intend to do is really and truly something that is needed, and find out, how best, will be beneficial to them, as opposed to just sending the contractor there, to embark on a project, So in terms of, and those in the community would have been a very good, watchdog in terms of making sure that these contractors, etc., are held to a certain standard and held to what they're supposed to do. So we go there, and then they can see the contractors working, etc., but they have no control over them, or they have no idea how the project is going to be done, etc.
One thing you raised, which I think is very instructive, is how thin we spread the funds.
Yes.
And therefore, maybe somebody needs 100 cedis, but he only gets 10.
Yes.
And so it's neither here or there. Would you have rather we consolidated it and targeted it a bit more?
I'd have loved that. And, PIAC has made this recommendation over and over again, that we should have what you call more or less heritage projects. Let's target big projects that will benefit generations down the line. So when we are talking about projects like, let's say, if you're talking about Nkrumah's era, we could be talking about things like Akosombo Dam, things like, the motorway, things like the Temahabo, things that at the time it was constructed, I wasn't even born. But I'm enjoying it. If I go, as you sit here now, you're enjoying some electricity, from Akosombo Dam. I use the Accra motorway, stuff comes in from the Temahabo, etc. But we're thinking that big projects that, we can all look back, yes, and say that, during the time when we had oil, we used it for this project, we used it for that project, etc. When you do it that way, it's easy to monitor. It's easy to, so assuming that we are doing a big project, let's say we are going to construct a railway line from Accra all the way to Paga, right? we know how much it's going to cost, you know. So we take this oil revenue and we dedicate it to that, you know. So we don't have a situation where, you know, there's even commingling of funds. A problem that we have with these other projects is that we have commingling of funds. So let's say that a certain percentage will come from oil revenue, and it might come from other sources. So at times it's even difficult to find out which percentage is oil revenue and which percentage is other revenue, you know. But we're thinking that oil revenue dedicated only to big projects that cut across the nation, right? Projects that we all benefit from. And if it's that way too, it's very, very easy to track the money, you know. But you have a situation where being used, you know, being diffused in such a way that very, very thin, you know, and at the end of the day, if you go back and look at what it's used for, if I go back to 15 years from now, a lot of these projects, if you go back, it's not going to be there. Right?
Look, let me divert the conversation a bit and then we'll come back, because I'm still staying with oil. With regards to Heritage Fund, there's two schools of thoughts. Those who think, listen, you know, use the money now for some capital gains so that the posterity will come and enjoy it. Those who say, no, keep the cash, posterity will come and they will choose whichever project they want to do. I probably don't want to ask you what school you belong to, but I mean, what should be done in this? I mean, should like pump all the money into education because you're educating them for future, pump it into agri because they'll have something to do, or save the cash because they'll come and take it?
Okay, so now to be honest with you, the feedback that we've gotten when we've gone on these district engagements, the vast majority are very much in support of the Heritage Fund. The vast majority of people, they like this concept of putting away money for future generations, their children, etc. You know, what they have a problem with is the way this Heritage Fund is administered. So the first problem that people have is that, so they will ask you, okay, so how much money, how much interest has been generated, you know, on the amount of the Heritage Fund, right? Now, if they'll ask you what the percent, like what's the rate of interest is, etc. Now, the rate of interest, you know, now the PRMA prescribes that you must invest the money, you know, in qualifying instruments which are safe. So, safe investment, low risk, low yield, right? So the interest that bears, you know, is relatively low. So when they hear, you know, what the interest rate is, which is roughly less than 2%, etc., right? They're like, so why are we investing this money and making this relatively low yield, and then we turn around and then go and contract these loans, you know, at much higher interest rates? You know, that what sense does it make, you know, to be putting away money and making relatively small yield, you know, and then turn around and then going to contract loans, you know, at these high interest rates? Another problem that they have is the fact that the Heritage Fund is invested outside the jurisdiction. It is not invested within Ghana, you know. So like the Norwegians, you know, Norwegians have a sovereign wealth fund. I think it's the biggest SWF in the world, etc. But they also do not invest in that jurisdiction because they have the fear of overheating the economy, right? Our situation is different from the Norwegians, right? So a question that's asked is that instead of taking this money out there, why don't we keep it here, you know? And then, you know, the banks can access it, etc. It can stimulate the economy, can boost the economy, etc. Instead of going to put it in some other jurisdiction, you know. But the reality is that there's also the fear, you know, that a politician, if it's here, some government might come into power and then touch the money, you know, So the general feeling is that they like the concept, they like this idea of putting money aside, but they have a problem with the mechanism, you know, how we are administering the fund, etc. You know, so that's why there was such a hue and cry. You know, remember when the new administration came to power, and then the senior minister proposed, you know, using some money from the Heritage Fund to fund the free SHS. There was an immediate outcry, you know, because he proposed that we amend Act 815, you know, to allow us to make withdrawals from the Heritage Fund to fund. So there was an immediate outcry because people in general don't like this idea of putting money aside. What they have a problem with is the low yield and the manner in which we are administering the Heritage Fund.
And then we have the Stabilization Fund. Educate me on the Stabilization Fund.
Okay, so the Stabilization Fund is supposed to be kind of like a buffer. You know, so in terms of shocks to the economy, etc., we can go in there, withdraw some money from there and then use it to more or less stabilize the economy, hence the word stabilization. So we're going to stabilize it, So stabilization fund, so let's say around 2014, we almost made $1 billion from oil revenue. We made about $978 million. Oil prices were high. So expectation going into 2015 was that oil prices were going to continue being high. But it tanked. So 2015, for instance, we came all the way to about $378 million roughly. Right? So then the projections you've made, etc., right, in terms of the budget, etc., you're going to have a hole there. You need to close that gap. So in a situation like that, you're going to dip into a stabilization fund and then try and close that hole. So when oil prices are high, money is coming in, etc., you can put a lot aside, for bad times, and when the bad times come, then dip in the stabilization fund and then more or less stabilize the situation. The problem with the stabilization fund is that you have this policy of capping. So under Act 815, the minister can cap the amount on the stabilization fund. So if he caps the amount on the stabilization fund, that means that any amount in excess of this cap, right, it goes to a contingency fund and then the DCA, that's for debt repayment, etc. So when it's not only about the fact that he can cap it, not only about the fact that the stabilization fund is capped, but he can move the cap with approval of Parliament. So there was a point
with the approval of Parliament.
With approval of Parliament. So we're around 300 million at some point. We went to 250. You went to 150. I believe now we're at around 100 million. Right. So PIAC has been pointing this out, advocating that if a stabilization fund with a cap of roughly about $100 million, it is not robust enough. Right. It's simply not robust enough. The cap is too low, and then there's the need to revise the cap. And there's also the need to look at the discretion of the minister, to place that cap there. So that's the problem that we have the stabilization fund. So currently, PIAC's position is that the capping at about 100 million is way too low, and also we need to relook at the minister's discretion to even place that cap there.
Let me take a quick break, and then when we come back, we continue on oil money. Don't go. Well, thank you very much for staying. And we're looking at the state of oil-funded project. With me in the studio is Dr. Thomas Kojo Stevens, Vice Chairman for PIAC. Doc, I'm listening to you, and I think one thing that's really missing out here is effective monitoring system and tracking system. Seem to be releasing the money and nobody's following. But who should follow to make sure that if this road is being constructed, it's what is said? If this school is being built, whose responsibility is it?
I think the best would have been the people in the community itself. But unfortunately, they are uninformed. They know nothing about the projects. They know nothing about the projects. They are uninformed about the projects, etc. But if you go for these district engagements, you can see that these people are very passionate about their communities. They'll ask you. So first and foremost, they'll ask you. So this oil revenue, they haven't seen it. How come none of it has been expended, in their community, etc. So then you show them that, okay, so this project, etc. Right? I suppose all revenue has been allocated in respect of those projects. They'll tell you that first and foremost that, they didn't know there was all revenue that was being used to fund the projects. And in certain situations, they'll tell you that those projects that you've mentioned, there's nothing there, right? So some of them would be very. We had a situation. Was it in the Ashanti region? Some guy was literally holding my hand, trying to tell him that, I should come. He wants to show me, this project I'm talking about. There's nothing there. I should come with him, etc. But if you have people, who are there and they know that oil revenue has been disbursed to do certain projects in their community, right? They will be the most effective, watchdogs in terms of making sure that the projects are done properly.
If we go to the issue of spreading too thin, then I'm looking at budget overruns. Why? Because if it's a 10 CD road and you give me 1 CD, if by the time 6 months you bring me the 9 CDs, I'll have to build up my interest and everything. Is the fund facing any such challenges or not?
So we have this big problem with the roads, especially with the contractors. Right? So by and large, when we go and inspect the roads by and large, they've been done. It's two issues. First and foremost, it's a matter of the quality of the road. Some of the roads, it's shoddy work, right? There are certain roads that you can see. There was one by this contractor, Janikov, right? It was good. It was very good if you compare it to the quality, because that one was at least, that was the whole Adidome road. There was lot 1, there was lot 2, and then there was lot 3. So you could compare the quality of the road, you know, so it was 3 contractors. So you could compare the quality of the work. It wasn't uniform, you know, it wasn't uniform, but you could see that his work at least was better than the other 2. There are certain roads that's been constructed. You go and there are already potholes, you know, in there. So you're looking at the quality of the work, and then, you know, you're wondering, I mean, are we getting value for money? Are we getting value for money? So we are disbursing all this money to the roads, etc. You know, so we have all these projects. So let's say roads, for instance, you have about 20 road projects, you know, but how many of them are that good? Assuming that you had limited it to 10 roads, it would have been better to get 10 very good roads instead of 20, you know, substandard roads. You know, so that's the situation that we have. Now, when we are talking to the field engineers, etc., you know, on site, one thing that they keep reiterating is the fact that the projects keep stalling. So the contractor will get to a certain stage, then you have to stop for a while because the money is not coming. And when that happens, in a lot of instances, the road deteriorates. When the rains come in, etc., the road deteriorates. When the contractor comes back, right, he has to start, you know, further back from where he had left off. And when all is said and done, when the contractor also computes the interest that has gained on the project, etc. Now, if you look at virtually all the projects, the contract sum at the beginning is very different from the contract sum at the end because it has ballooned because of the stalling in the projects, etc. So it's something that PIAC has recommended. You know, the field engineers also made a recommendation to us, and it's something that we put out there, that before you start a project, first and foremost, make sure that you have the money in to complete the project, and also that the designs are complete. You know, because you have certain situations where the road will be done, but then they will tell you that there weren't provisions made for certain things. You know, and so that will have to be a different contract altogether. So the road engineers, etc., you know, advised, and PIAC has put that out, that before you disburse, before any project is commenced in respect of the road, etc., first and foremost, make sure that the money is there, and then make sure that it's a composite whole. You know, anything ancillary to doing the road, it should be part of that contract.
So, oil-funded money, I think it goes to 5 areas, right? Is it rail, education, health, agric?
So it's 4. It's 4 priority areas. Yeah, the law prescribes that it should be used in accordance with a long-term national development plan. In the absence of a long-term national development plan, then you must allocate the money to not more than 4 priority areas. So Act 815 prescribes the areas that the money can be used, the areas that the money can be expended in. So that was part of the rationale for even having that mechanism in there, because we wanted a situation where we would prevent a diffusion, you know, in terms of the utilization of the resource. So the government, so every 3 years, the government is free to revise the priority areas. So let's say after 3 years, can decide to change the priority areas. So no longer focus on, let's say, road and maybe education. Then you could shift to health, etc. But per the law, within the 3 years, you must stick to the 4 priority areas.
I don't know if you can answer this, but you know, we live in a country where development is tailored, leans towards where there are votes. So, you know, look, if I give them street lights, I'll get votes, even though maybe this community needs more water. But there aren't too many people there, but there are many people here. I mean, do you find that the projects are moving towards, you know, voting areas rather than, you know, people who were needed areas?
Well, I mean, certain projects where it was clear that someone pulled a string or two, you know, to have the oil revenue come there. And in our interactions with the people in the community, a question that they keep asking is that, okay, so what's the determination as to who gets what? You know, I mean, is it arbitrary? Is it the government that just gets up and decides, you know, that you get this and you get that, you know? So they're even talking about the priority areas. The priority areas has not been so much of an issue because in our interactions with the citizenry, what are really their concerns have actually turned out to be more or less what the priority areas that the government has focused on. So, but by and large, you know, there's been the concern in terms of the allocation, you know, that some people feel as if they're not getting a slice of the pie, etc. And it is the case that certain projects, it is clear that, you know, it was some strings that were basically pulled, you know, to have that project, you know, in that community.
And the other issue is that, you know, you can use it for critical development.
Critical development.
I mean, you can use the money for something that you deem is critical for a community.
Yeah, but okay, you can go along those lines.
I was going to land on who determines on, you know, what's critical, because then it sort of leaves a window open for you to dip your hand in the oil fund at every given time. So, well, it was critical, or well, it was critical.
The priority areas. Okay, so if you take a look at the priority areas, I don't know about the wording critical per se, but okay. So agriculture and industry, fiscal infrastructure, you have a whole list there. I don't see the word critical here per se. So that's that's section 21.3, where it talks about the list, etc. What it permits is that we have what you call exceptional transfers. So assuming that there's tax overpayment or there's compensation which has to be paid to a community, etc., right? Or we have a situation where we have, let's say, an emergency. Okay, so it talks about so payment to the community and then tax overpayment. In that case, we can go in there and then take some money out, you know. But in the word critical, it's not really there. And that's
okay. Okay. With regards to petitioning people that you know, suspected to have misplaced the money, is PIAC going ahead to do that? Report them to the Accountant General?
So PIAC has done that.
The Auditor General?
Yes.
You've done that already?
So PIAC forwarded a report in respect of those projects in Upper East, Upper West, and the Northern Region to the Auditor General. PIAC did not go so far as to say that, okay, so Mr. A, Mr. B, you know, that corporate, etc. So what PIAC does is that we went there, these are findings. Mr. Auditor General, you know, can you look into this? We went, and then there was project A that was supposed to be done, it wasn't there. Project B was supposed to be done, it wasn't there. X amount of money was allocated, you know, to the project. The project is non-existent. These are findings. We forwarded to Auditor General. You know, so for the Auditor General to continue from there, do the investigations, and then take it from there. So PIAC will be watching to make sure that it's followed through. And if it turns out that, you know, the money has been misappropriated, etc., right? If the Auditor General comes out and then there are some people who are corporate, etc., right? PIAC will ensure that, you know, it is triggered in terms of prosecution, etc. But at this point, it's just PIAC's work just to come out with its findings and then give to appropriate bodies to follow up on that, which you have done.
Maybe you're not the right person to answer, but let me ask anyway. Because there's been a lot of overruns, delayed payment, could it be that case where, you know, the money that was supposed to, you know, go to school A or go to school B has gone to pay contractor B for his overruns because it delayed before coming, and so the money is in the system but not to where it says it went on the books, and that not necessarily that somebody's taking it, but this, instead of giving it to school A, they've given it to contractor B.
Okay, so PIAC, okay, we have our own view on this, PIAC, I mean internally, but I think this is a question that would be best directed towards an official at the Ministry of Finance, you know, because they come out to the project and they take care of disbursement, etc. So I think that they'll be better pleased to answer that.
I mean, how wrong would it be? I mean, we have 100 CDs in the pot. You know, 10 CDs were supposed to go to school A and 10 CDs to road A. However, we couldn't pay road A enough, so now we have to pay road A 20 cedis. So school A then suffers. I mean, if that's what happened, I mean, how wrong would they have been, or how bad would they have been?
See, but then it goes back to the starting point. That's in terms of the way we are executing these projects, we are simply doing it wrong. So you have a situation where you have several projects, right? The project that I have witnessed personally, none of them is inspiring. 6-unit classroom blocks, 6-unit classroom blocks. I mean, it's not, in my honest estimation, that is not the kind of project that oil revenue, should be expended on. It's money that would come from the, local funds, etc. From the government, etc. Right? But oil revenue should have been big projects, etc. So when I look at it, I still hold the view that. Going back to it, that we are doing it wrong. We are not utilizing the money in the best way possible. So going back to your question, you need to go to the starting point. You need to go back to the drawing board as to how we are spending the money.
I mean, is it possible that, or do you think it will ever happen that we'll go back and sit again and listen, it's a good idea, we need to use some of the money, but we are spreading too thin, or we are looking at areas which we shouldn't go? Should we come back to the table and rethink how we spend this money?
If I ask you now, off the top of your head, is there any project that you can see off the top of your head that is that, oil revenue was used to do this project?
No.
That's a problem, right? That's a problem. So as I sit here right now, I can tell you that, okay, so improvement maybe did that because of good dam, he did the Mabuka, he did this, he did that. But there's no big project that off the top of the head, anybody, the average man walking on the street can see that, oil revenue was used to do this, right? A big project, let's say you're constructing, a rail from Accra to Paga, for instance. Let's say I'm doing national service. It should be possible for me, right, to be sitting in Accra and do my national service, let's say in the north. So I get up in the morning, I should be able to get on a train, and let's say within an hour or two, I should be able to get there, do my nationals, if it's teaching, teach there, and then when I'm done, let's say in the afternoon, I get back on the train and come back to Accra. If you post people even to the north, etc., they don't want to go because, for them, they're leaving, their families are going to be far away, etc. But it should be possible for me to be living here if I want to, and then go there and go and work and come, But if you use oil revenue for things that can actually do revolutionary things, in the country, right? Then we are moving forward.
30 seconds before we close. In the absence of a long-term national plan, that's how come we pick and choose what we're doing. But now that there seems to be a national plan in place, are we now going to fall back on it so that the oil revenue follows the national plan?
In the absence of a long-term
national plan, we can pick and choose how we spend the oil money as per
the priority areas.
Priority areas. Yes. But if the national plan comes, then we have to go and
the national plan. Yes.
Yeah, but there's a national plan. There's one that was worked on, I think, a couple of years ago. So are we now going to follow it, or it's not official?
Well, to the best of my knowledge, we don't really have a national. I have a National Development Planning Commission, but if there was a national plan, then per the law, we'd have to go by the national plan. But we are going by the priority areas precisely.
Well, there was a 40-year plan that they came up with.
Well, then if there's a plan, then per the law, we are supposed to be going according to the plan. But since we're going according to the priority areas, presupposes that the perception or the reality is that there's no plan in place.
Well, all too soon, that's what time will allow us. We're looking at the state of oil-funded projects. Do you know of any building, road, rail, harbor, airport, dam that you can point and say, listen, this was oil money and it was ours and we are enjoying it? Well, I don't know any, and hopefully very soon we will find some. But before I go, I'll give you the number, 024-366-2001. 024-366-2001 is Tanti's Fashion. They make my shirts for the show. And thank you so much, Doc. It's been exciting and it's been educative.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.